Welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. We're back from hiatus and going to be flying into the challenges of 2024. It's a big year with the Euros, Champions League, League of Ireland, and so much more to come. So, as ever, we'll be coming to you weekly during the year and sometimes more often than that. You can subscribe, watch, or listen in on RTÉ.ie, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, while we've been away for the last couple of months, an Ireland women's senior manager has been confirmed, and that's Eileen Gleeson, of course. And then the men's vacancy is yet to be filled. But with the Nations League draw on Thursday acting as a loose deadline, or at least it was, before some of the events last week, it seems an appointment may be imminent, although we'll define what imminent means as we go along today. But I'm joined today by the 42.ie journalist David Sneyd and also RT Sport Online's Anthony Pyne. And Anthony, I suppose I'll come to you first. Just on the men's senior manager and this hunt for the replacement to Stephen Kenny. And the last couple of months really has been a story of what's been unsaid as opposed to what's actually been said on the record.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, last couple of weeks, there's conflicting reports around the chase for Lee Carsley, which is what it seems to have materialized into now, really. He's clearly the number one choice. There's people around Lee Carsley, I'm thinking of David Connolly in particular, who will be close to him, and you'd assume is speaking to him pretty regularly. And the feeling is that he needs to be sold on this, and I think if he really wanted it, Raf, he would now be the Ireland manager. He's so obviously the top target, but at the same time, he's in a position of strength because he'll know his own value. He will have options. He's the England under-21 head coach. He's very, very well regarded there. And maybe the sticking point is salary at this point. Maybe he's holding out for a little bit more. Would expect a little bit more. But it's dragged on probably longer than we anticipated, and the FA would clearly hope to have a resolution sooner rather than later. But like we don't really know. I mean, it just seems every day now something's coming up. You're hearing that he's definitely going to get it. Then he's gone cold on it. It does look like it's potentially the FA would have a confidence that they're going to get this over the line, but you'd wonder what happens if they don't, because the next name on the list is Neil Lennon. I think David has spoken about this, and we'll speak about this in a little more detail, I'm sure. But like it's that in itself is a little bit disconcerting because they're two very different types of managers, two very different types of coaches. So the overall grand plan here is a little confusing. What are they looking? What is the brief? When Eileen Gleeson was appointed as the women's head coach, and we sat down with Eileen and Mark Cannon, there was a clear brief for that role. And she ticked enough boxes to get the job. It wasn't just that she'd won 6 games out of 6 in the Nations League. She's buying into Mark Canham as the director of football. He has a plan and a vision for how the teams internationally should be aligned. And one of the things after the World Cup was that they wanted to reduce the average age of the squad. And they're things that she would be strong on and would have a strong buy-in, into. Whereas the men's role, I would have assumed that a similar kind of brief applies here. But if you're looking at Lee Carsley as your number one target, and then if we're to believe the bookies, Neil Lennon is the next man up, it doesn't seem like the same sort of consistency. Well, look, we'll see what happens in the next few days. You'd expect white smoke in the next week, but then again, the way things have played out in the last sort of month in particular, there's no guarantee about that either.
No, certainly not. And of course, as I said, loose deadline would have been earlier on. It would have been for this Thursday, the Nations League draw. But also, they would want someone in place for the friendlies in March against Belgium, which is on the 23rd of March, and then Switzerland on 26th. And David, before we get to the point of what differentiates Carsley, who appears to be the main candidate, and then Neil Lennon, who appears or has been reported as being the fallback option. The one thing to take away is the amount of bargaining power Lee Carsley certainly has here, where it seems that the FAI are more coming to him than the other way around. And then the other aspect as well, just how the FAI have managed to actually keep a lid on things, which was perhaps a little bit unexpected.
Yeah, because like if you go back, it even like again, I was writing about this even like last week or even just the week before, where in fairness, like Jonathan Hill laid it out very, very early in terms of what they wanted to happen, that he was the one who put this date on, obviously for the draw of having the new manager in place once the draw was made for the Nations League, and then using the games in March as the beginning of that preparation. I was a little bit surprised that he kind of came out and said that, because in my mind then I'm thinking, right, if they're coming out already saying something like that, they've clearly identified like who they want to speak to, who, like, what's going to happen, in terms of also sounding out in terms of, well, do you know what, this person wants the job. Because if you look back, like, it's not as if even we go back to say November time and early December when this happened, it's not a case of when Stephen Kenny's contract wasn't renewed and that was announced that the FA were all of a sudden, oh, okay, now we have to search for a manager. It had been pretty obvious for a couple of months even before that. You go back to that Stephen Kenny's contract wasn't going to be renewed the way the qualifying campaign for the Euros had gone. So, like, this was pretty much known. We go back, I think it was in a September time when Mark Cannon, the director of football, did that joint press conference with Jonathan Hill, and that was also in terms of dealing with the fallout from Vera Pauw, and he was kind of Mark Cannon was explaining why Vera Pauw had departed, and kind of Anthony touched on it there, laying out essentially what the new manager for the men's team was going to be as well, in the sense of they wanted someone who was going to be working within the structures of the FAI with that coaching plan and what's going to be in place there, and to be the head of that. Do you know what I mean? That's part of the reason why they kind of justified getting rid of not renewing Vera Pauw's contract. And, like, obviously they're two separate positions, but you can't really differentiate in terms of what they want from each one, because it was pretty much laid out that Vera Pauw was a kind of an outlier in the association of how she operated. It was very much a case of she did things her own way, and it was her way, and that was it. Whereas they want this structure now within the FAI of everything up being joined up thinking. Pardon me. That's what you see now with the men's job. I remember seeing a report in the Independent that they said they want the senior manager, the men's manager, to have a base in Abbottstown. I think people kind of misconstrued that as a way of saying, well, they want them just to be living in Ireland and full time. It's more so about having that presence where it feels as if everything is kind of together, and that's maybe could be part of the reason maybe why Lee Carsley, because he is the number one target. He's been the one who they identified, and he's the one who, for the last number of months, it's kind of blown hot and cold from the point of view of him being a little bit reticent. Then obviously you're seeing it even early this year where he was kind of being reported that he was close to taking the job, and then there was briefings coming from the English FA that no, he'd actually turned it down, when actually that hadn't quite been the case, and it has just led to a general sense of confusion. That's what I was writing about as well, in the sense of, like, they identified their main target, and if they're getting mixed messages there, that's when obviously, as Jonathan Hill said, they had spoken to various people back in December of who they wanted to obviously chat to, and that's obviously when Neil Lennon had come into it a bit more. He clearly has interviewed very well for it in terms of what they've spoken to, because that's the reason why he's still in the mix, partly also because unless something happens in the next few days, or even in the next week, that deadline that Jonathan Hill had established of this week to name the manager isn't going to be met. But I don't think that necessarily they should be beholden to that. And if Lee Carsley turns them down, they say, well, right, we just go to whoever has shown the most interest in the job. After, I think they have to make sure that it fits into the plan of where they're going. And then another point on that is we'll probably see another element of this is because there has been so much going on between Oireachtas hearings and all the rest of it, but also Mark Cannon might be working on the player pathway plan for the FAI, which is the short, medium and long term goal of where he wants to see Irish football. So you would think ideally when that's going to, because that was I think that had due to be kind of released and set up last month, because of then obviously the men's manager, and also with Eileen Gleeson getting the women's job, that had been pushed back then to this month. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a definitive date. There's been soundings that it will be released in February, which obviously is this month at some point. You would like to think then if part of that can be announced, and they'll know then who the senior manager is going to be, because that's a very important kind of document for essentially laying out the short, medium and long term plan for Irish football. And you would think by that point then that it will be this month that something will happen. But and then the truth of it is, you're chatting through, we can't still can't say for certain if Lee Carsley is the person who actually wants the job now, which is a strange one that it's kind of gotten to this point. Do you know what I mean? That it's gotten to this point where you're kind of still waiting to clear then that he is the one who the FAI have settled on, because they're willing to push things out and not move on. And in itself kind of will bring another element of pressure to him when he does get the job, because Like he turns 50 later this month. He's only a couple of years. I think he's only a couple of years younger than Neil Lennon. He has a lot more experience, and I don't know. It just kind of, with each passing kind of week and all the rest of it, it kind of just adds another element of, I feel that if he does eventually take the job, Lee Carsley, pressure, because they're saying, well, this is the fellow who the FAI have hung their hat on. He's the one who is clearly kind of taking his time and wants to be very considerate about what he wants to do, and weigh everything up. And then if he does take it, like I've said this previously, like it is, no matter how you judge it, it's a huge risk for him and his own career, because at the moment he's seen as his up and coming manager and maybe bright ideas and has been successful. Very quickly that kind of perception can change.
Yeah, and let's say he doesn't take it, and then the reporting, of course, has been earlier in the hunt for the new manager. Chris Hughton was the one that was being linked as the fallback option. That moved to Neil Lennon. The muddled thinking, perhaps, if one's looking at it, is potentially the fact that Lennon represents a very different option then, as Anthony sort of outlined at the beginning there, to what Lee Carsley represents, as given his experience working within a structure in England, within the youth teams. Neil Lennon's had a very different experience as a manager. Where do you land on that debate?
Yeah, like that. This is even from looking through, kind of, obviously, like Neil Lennon's been a senior manager for the past 14 years, on and off, and like Lee Carsley hasn't. He's worked obviously with the England under-21s, and he's been very, very successful there. He's kind of been in at different club levels, but as you say, like that perception seems to be now that Neil Lennon is this kind of almost kind of, it's almost cruel to say it, but a tired appointment. Does that make sense? In the sense of, he's not seen as someone who is more so at the forefront of where the game is going.
Yeah, a bit old school, sort of, in that sense.
Yeah, and whether that's the case, because like you hear people who have maybe worked with him, more so even in, say, in punditry, and they'll point to someone who during games is very tuned in, is very kind of alert to seeing, understanding how a game is going, and what can be happening and stuff in games. So like, he has impressed people who he's worked with that way. You look at his career, it's kind of felt, as making this point before, that maybe he's at a stage where he has obviously been a manager for quite a long time, and the last couple of years has just been a little bit, almost a bit adrift. Obviously, when he left Celtic the first time, he goes to Bolton, has a couple of years there, then goes back up to Scotland with Hibs, goes back to Celtic, then has that spell in Greece with ammonia, and then that ends, and he hasn't had a job for a couple of years, and it just feels as if, like, I'm going back to what Mark Cannon was saying, where he wants this kind of head coach figure who is going to be at the forefront of driving where the senior team is going, but obviously working within the parameters underneath that with the underage coaches, what Stephen Kenny had been doing. And it just doesn't feel as if that Neil Lennon fits that criteria. I don't know, again, that could be totally wrong. And this is the reason, again, in terms of interviewing for the job and what he's laid out himself, he's clearly, if he has risen up the kind of the pecking order in the actual candidates list, he's clearly given enough kind of indications to the people within the FAI who are making this decision, well, that actually he's not too dissimilar to Lee Carsley in terms of how he's going to operate. It just feels, looking at where he is in his career as a manager, he's not that kind of up and coming exciting appointment that people are expecting, purely because of what's already been outlined by the FAI and what they're looking for.
Yeah.
There is a thing, sorry, I just to expand on David a little bit, David's point there a little bit. Like, there's a thing about personality and the persona of managers that is really important as well, whether you like it or not. It just is. Like, a lot of people will have their mind made up about Neil Lennon before he even takes the job, because he's been in the public realm for so long. Even although he hasn't worked for a couple of years, he is working as a pundit. So some people are going to be all for him, other people won't. So he's not going to come in. For example, Stephen Kenny had an enormous amount of goodwill when he came into the job, and it sustained them for a long time, like almost to the bitter end. There was a large faction that really were behind him and willed him to do well. And this might sound a little unfair, I'm not sure Neil Lennon would get something like that. Lee Carsley is a blank slate. Like, we don't really know much about him in terms of how he deals with the media. He keeps quite a low profile in that regard. So I would say, for someone like Lee Carsley, if he's going to come in, and if he does get this job, like the FAI might want to sit down and kind of work on that side of it with him, because he's not. The advantage that Neil Lennon would have is that he has worked in pressure cooker environments, so he's used to it. He's used to that bubble, particularly obviously at Celtic. I think Stephen Kenny, he never really. I don't think he really did himself justice in terms of how smart and articulate he is as a person in post-match interviews in particular. Sometimes he was a little, he was kind of, he looked hesitant, and people make their minds up about things like that, because you got to remember, with a national team, any national team, you're going to have a big chunk of people who just come on board for these games who didn't really know much about Stephen Kenny. So I think if Carsley was to get this, it might be worth someone in the FAI sitting him down and maybe even doing a bit of media training. That's not to sound like condescending or anything. Obviously, he played in the Premier League; he'd be used to dealing with the media. But this is something different. Like when you're stepping into the headlight, he hasn't had a manager's job. He hasn't been in the spotlight in this way before. And I just think that kind of thing matters now. Probably more than ever. There's such a glare on these positions, on any high profile position.
It is very much sort of perception, and then projection, and how you put yourself across sometimes can be half the battle. And I was going to make that point actually, yeah, Anthony, just in terms of, we're talking about Lennon and Carsley and sort of their backgrounds, and like Carsley's lack of experience, let's say at senior club management level. Neil Lennon has a bit of that, but then there are people who would question his achievements at Celtic, particularly in his second spell. But then you look back at international managers, both for Ireland and further afield in the past, and you would say like Jack Charlton, Mick McCarthy, and then let's say the Argentina manager Lionel Scaloni. It's not like they were coming with this kind of huge and massively impressive CV. They've all done all right in the game, but sometimes having this huge CV doesn't necessarily mean much when the actual job starts.
Yeah, because it's a very different type of job, compared to club management. It's different. You got short windows where you have to try and make an imprint on a team in a really tight space of time. So it would help if you've got a really clear vision of what you want to do and you know how to implement that. And that's why Lee Carsley is so strongly in the conversation, because he's done that with the England under-21s. Now, what he's done with the England under-21s, he's doing obviously at that age grade, but also with an unbelievable crop of players. Like the technical ability of the players he's working with, he's not going to have that with Ireland. That's just the reality. And that's ultimately where Stephen Kenny fell down, because I don't think he was fluid enough to really find a solution of sort of having this style of play, but being a little more pragmatic. He never really cracked that. And his in-game management at times could have been better. He wasn't brilliant at reacting to when things were going against Ireland. Now it's hard. It's hard with what you're working with. Ireland are a team, a squad that are largely made up of championship players. And obviously we've got some young players with lots of potential. But like it's a tricky job for people. It's going to be difficult for whoever takes it. But like the thing you'd say about Carsley, and I think more so than the other candidates mentioned, that like he does have a very clear way of playing. I think anybody what are we going to expect from Carsley? Like you just have to watch how the under-21s play, the England under-21s play. And also importantly, and I think this is important, it's not radically different to what we've been trying to do under Stephen Kenny. Now, I wanted Ireland, I would hope that they get somebody who takes the best of what Kenny has done, and he has done good things, but obviously trying to improve on that just in terms of pragmatism and just being harder to beat.
But even on that point about, say, within games and Stephen Kenny, how he was reacting, and you're right, there was times, obviously the one game that stands out would be the Holland game, the Netherlands at home, and obviously the Dutch changed their formation at half time. But there was also a sense through the campaign that, with regards to the players, that the Ireland were very at times just naive, just as players, and that there wasn't really that kind of know-how a lot of time. When Seamus Coleman missed the back end of that campaign, it really showed. Like, I don't think it was a surprise that when he wasn't there, that they just hadn't got that same just like anger and all the rest of it around, just that little bit of grit, because like obviously there was such an influx of new players who are still very kind of inexperienced at that level. And like that was a factor that even in my own thinking for, well, where do you go with the manager's job for this? Do you go with someone who is going to come in and like not be learning on the job, because like Lee Carsley is an extremely experienced coach, and obviously at 21s level is used to has been successful. But like, do you come in and try and have a manager who gets more out of the players in that regard? But then I don't think that really is necessarily going to be the case at international level, because it's going to be a case of, well, how they progress at club level, how much football they're playing there, and then bit by bit just gaining that experience themselves. Because they're international players, there's certain basics and fundamentals in the game that you just demand from them or just expect as a given. But maybe when they're playing against more experienced players, that little bit of know-how is there, and you would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised as like that's something obviously like Lee Carsley is clearly a very thoughtful fella about. Not clear, he's not one of these. Those other options for other jobs previously, in terms of, you look at, say, Birmingham City and Stoke City, where had been mentioned as kind of people who were interested in him. Like, he's not someone who clearly just wants to take the next job and climb the ladder as quickly as possible. He's obviously looking and assessing, you would think, during this process, with the squad and where Ireland are at, and obviously it'll help obviously with the Euros, in terms of for the next Euros, that more than likely Ireland will be in there, obviously, as one of the co-hosts. And there is an element as well, if you look at it, of job security, because again, it's looking, it's going to be a 4.5-year contract. That's going to be a selling point, and that's going to be another thing for coaches, that actually having that security isn't going to be there in club football. Like, you could be gone after half a bad season. Like, he's going to have time to have that bit of an imprint, and you would imagine that that's something that he's going to be considering, because his next job, he's not going to have that element of security that he's going to go to. And you would think naturally, like, because I said, like, he's going to be 50 soon, he's going to have to make that step eventually. Does he feel that that's the next step to take with Ireland? Does he feel as if he does that with Ireland, the work he does, that he'll be able to continue on? Because let's be honest, for someone, you would think for him, it's not going to be his last job. It's not going to be like the pinnacle for him. That's just the nature of it. Like, he's going to probably think, well, what's in front of him in the next couple of years with this job at Ireland that could see him go somewhere else? Or, because eventually, let's be honest, like, the Premier League and stuff is the kind of is the aim, you would imagine. And he's, even, I'm saying that, but then you look at it, he's obviously well regarded within that English system for the last number of years as well. Like, Gareth Southgate isn't going to be in the main in the senior job within the next couple of years. You imagine after the Euros and the World Cup, he could be gone. Like, he's probably thinking, well, assessing, is he actually in the mix for that? Because the English FA have clearly gone down a route of, I know Gareth Southgate had managed previously, obviously, in the Premier League, but they're obviously want to keep it within their own structures as well. So he's clearly had a lot to think about in terms of assessing his own options. You know, it's not just, right, this is the next big job. We see it as a big job. Let's be honest, in the grand scheme of where it is in football, it's not. You know, that's just being brutally honest about it. But he clearly has taken his time to assess it. And going back to my original point on it, I just think with each kind of week that he doesn't make that decision, or the FAI haven't got it, it just adds to the pressure if eventually he does come in and take the job.
And I suppose a final point on this before we move on to other things, I suppose, in the absence of white smoke from FAI HQ, but the David, I mean, I suppose the main aspects in terms of the job remit then will be emotional intelligence, I suppose, is probably the biggest thing at international level, given the lack of training sessions that are there, and then also the makeup of a backroom team. And it's not quite clear who either of these candidates would be bringing on board.
Yeah, well, that's another element to it as well. Like, again, that would be something that you would imagine over the last little while, in terms of has been broached with the FAI. Like, they have to have that picture in mind of who is going to be coming in. And if you look at the England under-21s, wasn't it? He's working with Ashley Cole was in there with him. You would think he's going to have bring in a staff with him who he trusts, but also, like, you literally made a point there about the timing. Like, he's going to want to have staff around him who knows how they work, because he's going to be coming into a new environment. He hasn't worked within the FAI obviously since he was a player, which is obviously a number of years ago, but that was obviously completely different. So he's going to be coming into an environment where he's going to be wanting to have people around him who, and this, whoever the manager is, who just hit the ground running and get into things as quickly as possible. And that's another element, I would say, of why I would be maybe not wanting to appoint Neil Lennon as well, because he actually hasn't got that experience of, say, the international level in terms of a manager. Obviously, he's an experienced former international, and he has all that understanding as a player of, like, how camps and all will be running. But that's where I'm kind of feeling, you kind of want a manager who knows, you were saying about the emotional intelligence and all the rest of it, but even just just the basics of the best way of utilising as a coach and a manager that time that you do have together, because he's going to be learning a little bit about players as well. So that's why as well I would say someone who has that already, that level of experience is so important.
Yeah, and before we move on to the Ireland women's, and obviously fixtures confirmed for later this month, some of the transfers in recent times involving some of the senior internationals, David. I mean, Adam Idah, I saw some clips of his debut at Celtic. I know Chris Sutton probably wasn't had a sort of dim view of it in regards to maybe it wasn't the revelatory signing that Celtic were looking for. But then in the other direction, then Mikey Johnston goes on loan to West Brom. Joe Hodge scores on his debut, going on loan from Wolves to QPR, and then Sam Curtis has finally made the move and he's gone to Sheffield United. So obviously he's not a senior international at this point, but he's one that we're looking to in the future, hopefully kind of developing. But what have you made of all those moves? I suppose more so Idah and Curtis in particular.
Yeah, well, I suppose like for Idah, it was just a sense like it just felt like for him for the last little while, he's just needed to play regular football and get into that rhythm of games, because we've seen flashes of him with Ireland where he's looked really, really impressive, and he's looked like you can see why Stephen Kenny had so much faith in him. Like, I go back one of the game saved me away to Portugal in Faro a few years ago now, like when he led the line in that game. This is obviously pre Evan Ferguson. You're kind of looking, thinking, right, this is a fella who, please God, stays injury free, gets a run of games, and just career can, as I was making the point earlier, develop. And he just hasn't been able to do that. It's been injury, he had an issue with his back, which is obviously always a bit of a worry. He just hasn't been able to kind of kick on and just get that rhythm of playing consistently. I remember there was a point, when Daniel Farke was the Norwich manager, and I'm almost certain it would have been the season when they were in the Premier League. I think he had like the lowest amount, he was saying, the lowest amount, fewest amount of minutes on the training pitch, even at immediate, in terms of how we could train. And that was at a point where you're like, that just kind of, that was a few years ago now, but that kind of an indication of just not able to kind of kick on your career. And this is another element that international managers have to deal with, where you can see some of the kind of the talent that's there, but if they're not playing consistently, it's going to be very, very tough to as I was saying, to develop in your career and then become a seasoned international. Now, it has helped in the last year that you scored a few goals for Ireland. That'll obviously improve and help his confidence. That's all you're hoping for with Celtic now for the next little while, is that he plays. But he's also in an environment there at Celtic that's completely different to Norwich, where the pressure he's going to be under to not just be playing and have that sense of really playing, not just to enjoy it and do it, whatever, but like he's going to have to be producing. Like, we had an assist the weekend. They're going to be expecting to score, like, they have to score goals and deliver points, because obviously they're in a serious title race now with Rangers, the way things are going there as well. So like it's going to be a big test of his character over the next little while, and you just hope that he actually can stay fit for it and can do it, and that'll be another challenge for him and will hopefully speed up more of his development, because it is going to be a serious amount of pressure he's under, even though it is only a long move. And then with Sam Curtis, I think even when he kind of signed, even listening to the stuff from Chris Wilder, is definitely, I don't think he's someone who will be playing in the Premier League this year. Like in terms of, it's definitely a sense that he'll be going in. Now, it could be totally different if he goes in and hits the ground running and they see what he's like in that environment. But it does seem as if he's someone who he'd be kind of having his powder kept dry for maybe even for next year and developing that way. But then, like, with that, it's because you've seen him develop over the last little while in the League of Ireland and have that composure for such a young player and play so many games. You kind of felt, well, you wanted to see him straight away go into an environment where he, similar to Adam, he just have that challenge again. And then what happened for him, you never know. Like, although like the state Sheffield United are in at the moment and the results they've had, it's almost not an environment you want to be throwing them into, in terms of what it might do for him. If they do go down to the Championship, perhaps he'll have more of a chance to break through there. But he's definitely someone who, like, if you're looking at it, will have the potential to go on and become an international. But again, he's shown great promise so far in the League of Ireland, and how he settled in there for such a young kid, and just straight away just looked composed. That's what you're hoping now for in that next stage, is that he just makes that kind of the leap again, because it's an altogether different ball game over at obviously Premier League or potentially then Championship level.
Yeah, and then moving on to the Ireland women's. So the friendly fixtures, and this is all building up towards the European Championship qualifiers. They're playing Italy on the 23rd in Florence, and then Wales in Tala 4 days later. And of course, Anthony, since our, I think, the last episode of the soccer podcast towards the tail end of last year, Eileen Gleeson was confirmed as manager after her very successful interim spell during the Nations League. And it seems, rather than this month being one of revolution with a new manager, it's going to be just a kind of bit of continuity from the tail end of last year and a bit of evolution as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, and her hand got stronger the longer the process went on for Eileen Gleeson, because continuity is obviously something that she can offer. A new manager had come in December. They would have only had these two friendlies to prepare for the qualifiers. And Ireland don't know who they're going to get. The draws in March, early March, but they're going to be in with the big guns. Having been promoted to League A. I think the two friendlies are good picks, or I think they're two good friendlies because Wales 32nd in the world, but quite progressive. They were unlucky in the World Cup playoff. They were beaten by Switzerland, but they're improving. They're a decent side, and then Italy are 14th in the world and will be a good test. And it's a good bridge for them, because the Nations League, in all fairness, all due respect to the other teams in Ireland's group, it was a pretty weak group. And if Ireland are going to commit to this new style of playing, which we're told that they absolutely are, in terms of being more aggressive with the ball and trying to keep hold of it more and play a little higher up the pitch, which is what we've seen throughout the Nations League very successfully. And then, the stress tests will come when they play really good sides. And Italy and Wales are better than what they would have played in the Nations League, but they're not the USA. It's not England, where you could be ripped to shreds if you're not quite there yet in terms of plans. So it's a good opportunity to evolve a little more. It's funny, we're talking about this kind of high profile job and what it can do and the challenges of it. Eileen Gleeson has already spoken when she was unveiled in December. She said, it's weird that she's been in the game for decades, the Irish women's game for decades, and now she's suddenly getting recognised on the street and people are asking for selfies, and it's all a little bit, it's overnight, that kind of change, and it takes a little time to get your head around that. But look, she's earned the chance to get this, and you talk about how different international jobs are. Like, her last job was with Glasgow City, her last club job, and it didn't go very well for her. But that doesn't mean that she's not going to be a success here. I think she's got every chance. She had a perfect campaign, the Nations League campaign. I think she was the right person at the right time, coming off the back of the World Cup, which was such an emotionally draining experience, on and especially off the pitch, with how Vera Pauw's reign ended. That team were jaded. They were emotionally jaded coming back from Australia, and there was an awful lot of frustration, which obviously simmered. Diane Caldwell laid it out in a press conference after Vera Pauw went, and really sort of lifted the lid on a lot of the issues that we had heard. For those of us who were in Australia, there had been whispers that the squad wasn't happy with some of the aspects around training and how the team was being set up and managed and things like that. So she was the arm around the shoulder that they needed. I thought Emma Byrne and Colin Healy were two smart picks for the backroom team, but that backroom team may well change. I don't know if I think there could be a reshuffle. I'm actually surprised we haven't heard more about that to this point. I thought we would have in January. I thought that the backroom team would have been confirmed, because there's no guarantee they're going to be kept on. There might be a feeling that they were the right people for then. But Mark Canham has spoken. He has a vision for that team, and Eileen Gleeson is buying into that vision, and with that there might be a couple of fresh faces in the backroom team. But it's a big year for them again. Like the qualifiers in April, they could be up against Spain or in England or Germany. They're in with the big guns, but the potential prize, if they manage to finish in the top two of that 14 group, they're there. They're in Switzerland in 2025 for the Euros, and even if they come third or fourth, bottom of the group, they're the safety net of the playoffs. So lots going for them, lots of opportunity, but the expectation has never been higher now. I think they're all very aware of that. And they haven't been shy about airing their ambitions and what they expect from themselves, but that will bring a certain kind of pressure and spotlight on them. But they're looking good. They're looking good, and there's some exciting talent coming along as well. You know, not least Tara O'Hanlon. I'm speaking about Irish transfer. She got a move to Manchester
City,
City in January. And she's a great prospect, Raf. She's a really talented player. I mean, she would have been involved in the Nations League. She was just unlucky with injury. That's the only reason she wasn't. And I think the other really significant transfer for Ireland in January was Izzy Atkinson to Crystal Palace, because I just think that she, in the here and now, is very important to Ireland, because she is a lefty. She can play on the left and offers balance, but she frees up Katie McCabe. It allows fluidity in how you use Katie McCabe. That she's so capable of going in and doing that role, and can play McCabe centrally, or even if you start Katie left back, you have an option to move her centrally, move her around the pitch. Liverpool played Arsenal yesterday, and they didn't have a left-foot player on the pitch for the first time this season. For the starting 11 didn't have a left-foot player on the pitch, and I think it hurt them. I think, you know, that having natural width on your left side is really important. So I think Izzy Atkinson going to Crystal Palace, she scored yesterday or at the weekend, and her getting minutes is good. It's good for her, and I think it's good for Ireland.
Yeah, Abby Larkin, of course, joining her there as well. And then Megan Campbell has made the move to London City Lionesses, and all that was on deadline day, which was actually came the day before the men's deadline day, where I think the biggest move actually happened in Formula One rather than in football. But anyway, President's Cup final, David. So this is this Friday, and it's sort of the starting gun for the new season. And Shamrock Rovers obviously looking to build from a position of strength. Pats seem to have made some very interesting transfer moves. The game itself, okay, we can't read too much into it in terms of what that will mean for the season. But what have you made of the moves both teams have made during the off season?
Well, obviously starting with Rovers, I suppose, like obviously they've kept players, which is important. Like they've kept Rory Gaffney and they've kept Jack Bourne, and it's kind of maybe underestimated that there was serious offers in for those players from around the league, and options there. So it was important that they obviously were able to keep those players, and it's also very telling that in terms of with Rory Gaffney, that as soon as they had won the league and that was kind of boxed off, he was one of the players who they made sure they were able to because he's going to be still so important. They brought obviously Johnny Kenny back in on loan from Celtic to kind of maintain that, and then obviously Trevor Clark is there as well. So they've kind of brought in, but maintained that kind of those, but then also like bringing in Darragh Burns, like it's like I remember he was one of the players who was up for media duties the week before last, and he's just had a really tough time of it, obviously, when he went over to MK Dons, between getting injured after a couple of months when he had kind of broken into the team and was getting minutes and getting games, then having 3 different managers in such a short space of time while he was there. And then you kind of forget, that obviously going through that, you kind of forget just how much of an impact he was having for Pats before he left, and what he was able to do in terms of like coming in. He can play, like Anthony was talking about, kind of offering balance. Like he can play on that left hand side, but he can also play on that right hand side. He has that ability to be able to do it on both. You think back to that, it was a few years ago now, that first game of the season, I think it was, for between Pats and Shells a few years ago, when he scored that unbelievable goal at Talca Park. And he just has that capability in him in the league. It's like another, Rovers have kind of added another game changer. You look at last season when they were struggling, even going back to the season before, when they were scoring late goals and they were getting, maybe when Jack Bourne was out of the team, they had little moments in games where they just weren't able to find that little bit of magic, and they were maybe losing a game or drawing a game. Like Darragh Burns is the sort of player who can just, on the days when they are finding it tough, can just produce something out of nothing. So he could be really impressive for them. It's going to be interesting. I know, like, the fact that the Alan Manis has left, he's been so, like, just so solid there for the last number of years under Stephen Valley when he came back to the club. And obviously Liam Paul looks as if he's going to be the first choice. That is, there's no getting away from it. That is going to be a question mark there in terms of how that kind of settled in with the defense. It's not as if he's like a new keeper coming into the team, into the club, who has to get used to the players. Like, he's been there for a few years. They all know him. You speak to players, even like last year, when it was, they knew obviously Manis was leaving, they all spoke very positively about him and what he offers. But the fact is, he hasn't been playing consistently, so there's going to be a question mark there. So that would be one where, like Stephen Bailey made a point last year that last year was the year they felt they could have been caught because of how they kind of were stuttering during the season. Now as the season wore on, they finished it very strongly, and then they won the league comfortably. But like I don't think they'll be able to afford it this year. You would think that and hope that clubs like Pats and also Derry, who only added a couple of players like Patrick Cuban coming in, and Daniel Kelly, they're the only players at Derry, because like even Rudy Higgins talking about was happy with the squad. He just wanted that goal scorer to come in and someone, and obviously also a winger, but he just wanted that experience to come into it, to come into his squad, who have been successful. And when the going gets tough, maybe like Human, because he's said he thrives on it himself, when the pressure is on, to actually be delivering, because it's not getting away from it. Derry just weren't capable of capitalising on Rovers last year, like, you know, when Rovers were slipping. And the same went for Pats. Different scenario, because obviously John Daly came in as manager from assistant last year and had a great impact. Obviously they won the cup, and they've lost a couple of players. They've brought in some players, but there's still that question mark about how will Pats kick on. And if last season's not the go boy, with obviously with the impact that John Daly had, you would like to think that they can, but you also want to see Derry. I think Derry are still the ones I feel over the last couple of years have been now kind of building towards this, do you know what I mean, in terms of a challenge. And I think Derry are the ones who you'd be looking at really and saying that they have to do a lot more to put it up to Rovers next season.
Yeah, and you mentioned two of those clubs, Derry and Pats, on Friday, 1st of March. That's going to be our second live game of the season for this season. Before that, on the opening night, we'll have Shamrock Rovers against Dundalk. So that's Friday, 16th of February, Tallaght Stadium at 7:45 p.m. And as I said, Derry and Pats on the 1st of March. And then the 15th of March, we'll have our third live game of the season, Galway United against Shamrock Rovers. And then on the 29th, we'll have Shamrock Rovers against Bows in the Derby at Tallaght Stadium. Before we go, we'll just touch on a little bit of Premier League. Obviously, yesterday Arsenal beat Liverpool 3-1 in a game that had its fair share of errors at the back from both sides. Kind of a bit of calamity on that side. But Anthony, I suppose the wider narrative around Liverpool with this procession towards the end of Jurgen Klopp's tenure, I guess it is sinking in for Liverpool supporters, but it has had to be parked for the moment, given there's challenges in terms of a Carabao Cup final to come, the FA Cup as well, and then of course still being top of the Premier League, and Man City breathing down their neck.
Yeah, and the players have to try and park that, but it's not going to be parked. Like, every single game is one chalked off the list. And if Liverpool start to stutter, there'll be lots of chat about why did they announce it when they did, and is this affecting the players, and they look so strong and now suddenly they wobbled. Like, I think if Liverpool don't win the league, it just won't be quite good enough. It's not going to be for any other reason. Like, looking at it now, it looks like Manchester City could easily have this league win with a couple of games to spare, because they look like the best team in the league. They're the best team in Europe. And I thought yesterday, Liverpool just didn't turn up. Arsenal played well. They had to win. Arsenal, I think, if Liverpool had won, that was it really for them. They would have been done and dusted in terms of a realistic title charge. But at the same time, all the flaws were on show. Arsenal completely dominated the game, and it was 1-1 at half time. And the only reason they regained control was because of an absolutely incredible error involving Alisson and Van Dijk. Look, how often do you see that? You probably never see that type of thing again with two elite players. But that's how the game swung. It was a calamitous error. Actually, Liverpool kind of sorted themselves out a little bit in the second half, and the game was probably heading for a draw. And that's the kind of team Arsenal are at the minute. I think they're probably a really top attacking threat, shy of pushing City to the pin in the collar. And the thing is, with last season, I don't think that was a real title race last season. I thought City won the league pretty comfortably. So are Arsenal better than they were this time a year ago? I don't know. Like, I think Declan Rice is obviously brilliant, a great signing for them, and he stiffened them up in the middle of the park. But I'm not sure. I think that the acid test can Arsenal go to the Etihad and win? I don't think they can, and I don't think they will. And Liverpool are probably, I wouldn't say a false position, but they're a flawed team who are going to need a lot to go for them to pull it off. And I think the chief thing, and this probably applies to Arsenal as well, is like the thing that they need to go from is for City to wobble, and it's just really difficult to see that.
Yeah, especially once I saw Kevin De Bruyne coming back and he's hit the ground running, and now Haaland thrown in as well. So it's almost like the proverbial new signings. But before we go, I did want to touch on Conor Bradley, David, and obviously thoughts with his family with the passing of his father a few days ago as well. But he had sort of burst onto the scene, and his emergence has really captured the attention here. And especially midweek against Chelsea, the way he took his goal, and then his assists as well. Lots of potential there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even like obviously he breaks through, and obviously you look back at even at the loan spell he had with Bolton, and again, I probably repeat myself a little bit, but it goes back to what I was saying about, say, Adam Idah and some of the players where like he had that challenge and stood out at that level. You know, we went there and had that challenge and rose to it. And like I know it's really little things, but like physically was able to maintain the level to perform, which is a big thing. Like you can't get away from it. Like the jump from going from playing, say, academy football, 23s football, and then physically and mentally demands are being placed in that environment, and he's shown. And then he's come into it obviously at Liverpool. And that's why you can be sure that Jurgen Klopp would have put him in, because he's seen him on a daily basis and knows that he's capable of maintaining those standards. You know, obviously he got his chance with obviously Trent Alexander-Arnold being injured, and just he took it, but he's done what you have to do as a young player. Of when you do get a sniff of an opportunity, you have to impress. Now, like you still have to maintain an element of caution where like he's still so new to this level where he has shown what he is capable of, and the challenge for him is gonna be now over the next little while on a daily basis, delivering it in training, and because that's where he'll be almost judged even more harshly than again, that's because that's where if he doesn't do it there, he's not going to be getting picked. You know what I mean? Like he's had those moments in games where like his goal he took against Chelsea was excellent, but then also just some like that tenacity and the defensive instincts he had. Even I mean, it was for the first goal where obviously he wins the ball back, but then he's on the full foot. You know, like very easily could have been right, win the ball, pass a square, take the easy option, relax with it. He's kind of thrived, and he's kind of got into that. As we're saying, he's got his opportunity and he's taken it. And the hope for him will be to just maintain it. I was making it's so obvious, and it's a point to be made across the board. But it was the same with Evan Ferguson when he broke through at Brighton, and he's obviously scored a couple of goals. But you were more so hoping that you just see a level of consistency in his game, all round game. So like that's what you'll be hoping to see with Conor Bradley for Liverpool fans, is that he just gets to this level and shows that he's capable of just maintaining it. You know, and that's so difficult because you can be sure now over the next little while. Like was said there about kind of Eileen Gleeson, how her life changed, as I imagine like his life is going to change now over the next little while in terms of the focus on him, being obviously recognised, all the different stuff that comes with now being looking at a Liverpool player, not even just a Premier League player, but a Liverpool player, and like the pressure that there's only so much more coming for him now, and you would think if he's got to this point in his career, he clearly has the head for it, and that's what you hope now, is that he can just deal with all the different challenges that are going to be coming. And obviously it's dreadful what he's going through now at the moment, but then when he does get back to football, that he's able to maintain the level he's at, because what he's been producing has been, some of it has been obviously extremely eye-catching, but even just some of the basic stuff of how he's doing, he just looks so comfortable. And for a young player coming in at a club like Liverpool, it's phenomenal to see, because like you can only imagine the pressure and the strain that you'd be under to make sure you're performing, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose the final point as well, he got his international start with Northern Ireland quite early on as well. I think he's already up to something like 13 caps.
Yeah, and that's another element. Obviously, they recognised early coming through. Obviously, people would say, you know, obviously he's one that got away for the Republic of Ireland, but he obviously came through their system and they recognised the potential that was in him. And like that was saying about obviously we're being kind of captaining on an underage level, they clearly saw this is a fella who, like, it was worth giving him those early caps, because they felt, well, this is a fella who's only going to be going one way in his career, because he has that ability to be able to deal with rising up the levels in football. So they obviously were able to see it, and you know, fair play to them. Like they're the ones who have helped, obviously with the IFA of developing and putting that time and work in. He's obviously done a tremendous amount of work himself, but he's someone who already at a young age, between playing obviously regularly for Bolton when he was on loan there, and obviously international football, and now obviously Premier League at 20, has a serious amount of experience behind him. But as we're saying, what he's going to be dealing with now over the next little while is going to be on another level. But if you keep on rising through the different levels to this point, as I was saying earlier, like the hope is that you can just deal with it again.
Yeah, for sure. But that brings us to a close for today. We'll be back next Monday when we'll be dedicating the bulk of our time to previewing the new SSE Electricity Premier Division season club by club and looking ahead to the start of the Champions League knockout stages as well. And perhaps there will be white smoke as well from the FAI headquarters by then as well. But who knows? But anyway,
All hail
David.
Neil Lennon. All hail Neil Lennon.
We'll see who it is. David, thanks very much for your time, and Anthony as well.
Cheers, Rob.
Cheers, man.